"This ain't the place, miss." The conductor's voice cut through Maggie O'Connell's thoughts like a knife through butter. She blinked, clutching her worn leather valise tighter against her chest. The train hissed and groaned behind her, steam rising into the pale afternoon sky. "What do you mean?" Her voice trembled. "This here's Ridgeway Station. You asked for Ridgemont. That's 2 stops east." The blood drained from Maggie's face. 2 stops east. She looked around the platform. A handful of weathered buildings lined a dusty main street, a mercantile, a saloon with faded paint, nothing like the bustling town she'd been promised in the letters. "When's the next train?" she asked. 3 days, ma'am. Tuesdays and Fridays only." 3 days. Her fingers trembled as she touched the small envelope in her pocket. The one with Mr. Edward Palmer's address in Ridgemont, her future husband, a man she'd never met but who'd offered her escape from Boston's suffocating boarding houses and empty promises. "I reckon you need a place to stay," the conductor said, softer now. He tipped his hat and pointed toward a man standing near a wagon. "Silas Crow runs a decent ranch just outside town. He's a fair man." Before Maggie could respond, the conductor was gone. The train whistled, lurching forward, leaving her alone on the platform with nothing but her valise and a growing sense of dread. She turned toward the wagon. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. He stood perfectly still, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Beside him, a small girl with tangled brown hair clung to his pant leg. Maggie took a breath and walked toward them. Her boots echoed on the wooden planks. "Excuse me, sir. I'm told you might." "Mama!" The little girl's shriek cut her off. Before Maggie could blink, tiny arms wrapped around her waist. The child pressed her face into Maggie's skirt, sobbing with a ferocity that shook her small frame. "Lydia, no." The man moved forward, but the girl held tighter. "You came back. You came back, Mama." Maggie's heart twisted. She looked down at the child, then up at the man. His jaw was tight, his eyes shadowed with something that looked like pain. "I'm not." Maggie started, but the words caught in her throat. The little girl was shaking, her sobs muffled against the fabric of Maggie's dress. The man crouched down, his voice low and careful. "Lydia, this ain't your mama, sweetheart. She looks like mama. She smells like mama." Lydia's voice rose, desperate and raw. Maggie's throat ached. She knelt slowly, setting her valise down. The girl's eyes were red-rimmed, her face streaked with tears. There was something achingly familiar in that desperate hope. "What's your name?" Maggie asked softly. "Lydia." The girl sniffled, her grip loosening just slightly. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Maggie. Are you staying?" Lydia's voice was small now, fragile. Maggie glanced up at the man. He was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. His expression was unreadable. But there was something in his eyes. Weariness. Exhaustion. Maybe a flicker of something else. "I missed my stop," Maggie said quietly. "I need to wait for the next train." 3 days, the man said. His voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. "Yes." Silence stretched between them. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the empty platform. Somewhere in the distance a horse whinnied. The man straightened, his jaw working as if chewing over a decision. Finally he spoke. "Name's Silas Crow. I got a ranch a few miles out. You can stay in the spare room, just till the train comes." "I couldn't impose." "Ain't an imposition if I'm offering." Maggie hesitated. She looked down at Lydia, who was still clinging to her hand, hope shining in her tear-streaked face. "Please stay," Lydia whispered. "Please." Something inside Maggie cracked. She'd come west looking for a new beginning. Maybe this wasn't the beginning she'd planned. But standing here with this broken little girl holding her hand and this quiet, wounded man offering her shelter, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. "All right," Maggie said softly. "Just for 3 days." Silas nodded once, then turned toward the wagon. "Let's go then. Sun'll be setting soon." Lydia held Maggie's hand the entire walk to the wagon. The little girl's grip was fierce, as if letting go might make Maggie disappear like smoke. As Silas loaded her valise into the back, Maggie caught his eye. He looked away quickly, but not before she saw it. Doubt, worry, and beneath it all a flicker of something that looked dangerously close to hope. The wagon creaked as they climbed aboard. Lydia squeezed between them, her small hand never leaving Maggie's. Where's Ridgemont from here? Maggie asked as the wagon rolled forward. 2 hours east, Silas said. If you ride hard. And the man I was supposed to meet, Mr. Palmer. Do you know him? Silas's jaw tightened. I know of him. There was something in his tone that made Maggie's stomach drop. But before she could ask more, Lydia tugged on her sleeve. Do you like horses, Miss Maggie? Maggie smiled despite herself. I do. We got 6. And chickens. And a cow named Bess. That sounds wonderful. Lydia beamed, leaning against Maggie's side. The weight was small but significant, a trust given too easily, too desperately. Maggie glanced at Silas. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, his expression carved from stone, but his hands gripped the reins just a little too tight. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The ranch appeared on the horizon, a modest house, a barn, fences stretching toward the hills. It looked nothing like the future Maggie had imagined. But as Lydia's hand tightened around hers, Maggie realized something unsettling. It felt more like home than anything she'd left behind. Here we are, Silas said, pulling the wagon to a stop. Lydia jumped down and tugged Maggie toward the house. Come see my room. Come see. Maggie followed, glancing back once. Silas stood by the wagon watching them. His expression was impossible to read. But in that moment, as the last light of day touched his face, Maggie saw something that made her breath catch. A man who'd forgotten what it felt like to hope, and a little girl who was teaching him to remember. Morning light crept through the thin curtains of the spare room. Maggie woke to the smell of wood smoke and coffee. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The wrong station, the little girl, the quiet man with shadows in his eyes. She dressed quickly in her simplest calico dress and pinned her copper hair into a modest bun. When she stepped into the kitchen, Silas was already at the stove, flipping cornbread in a cast-iron skillet. Morning, he said without turning around. Good morning. Can I help? Coffee's on the table. Lydia's still sleeping. Maggie poured herself a cup and sat down. The kitchen was sparse but clean, a table with 4 chairs, though only 3 looked used. The 4th had a thin layer of dust on the seat. She didn't ask about it. Silas set a plate of cornbread and bacon in front of her. Eat. Work starts early around here. I don't expect you to feed me without earning my keep. He glanced at her, something flickering in his dark eyes. You know how to work a ranch? I can learn. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Fair enough. They ate in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, just careful, like 2 people walking on ice, testing each step. Papa. Lydia appeared in the doorway, her nightgown wrinkled, her hair a wild tangle. When she saw Maggie, her whole face lit up. You're still here. I told you I would be, Maggie said gently. Lydia climbed into the chair beside her. Can we make biscuits today? Mama used to make biscuits. Silas's jaw tightened. He stood abruptly, carrying his plate to the wash basin. Finish your breakfast, Lydia. Then get dressed. Miss Maggie's got things to do. But Papa. Now, sweetheart. The little girl's face fell. She picked at her cornbread, her earlier joy evaporating like morning dew. Maggie's chest ached. She reached over and squeezed Lydia's hand. After chores, maybe we can make something special. If your papa says it's all right. Lydia's eyes brightened again. She looked at her father hopefully. Silas didn't turn around, but his shoulders relaxed just slightly. We'll see. After breakfast, Maggie followed Silas to the barn. The morning air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of hay and earth. Chickens scratched in the dirt near the coop. A brown cow lowed softly from her stall. This is Bess, Silas said, gesturing to the cow. She needs milking twice a day, morning and evening. I've never milked a cow before. Then you'll learn. He brought over a 3-legged stool and a pail, positioned himself beside Bess with the ease of long practice. His hands moved in steady rhythm, and milk began to stream into the bucket. You watch first, then try. Maggie watched. There was something calming about the repetition. The sound of milk hitting metal, the patient way Silas worked, murmuring low words to Bess. After a few minutes he stood. Your turn. Maggie sat on the stool. It wobbled beneath her. She reached for Bess's udder, hesitant. Firmer than that. She won't break. Maggie tried again. Nothing happened. Here, Silas crouched beside her. His hand covered hers, guiding her grip. Like this. Pull down and squeeze. His hand was warm. Calloused. Strong. Maggie's pulse quickened, though she couldn't say why. Milk squirted into the pail. There you go, Silas said quietly. He pulled his hand away and stood. Keep that rhythm. Maggie focused on the task, her cheeks warm. It took longer than when Silas did it, but eventually the pail was half full. Not bad for a first try, he said. It was the closest thing to praise she'd heard from him. They worked through the morning, feeding chickens, mending a section of fence, hauling water from the well. The work was hard, but Maggie didn't complain. She'd done harder things, survived worse. By midday her back ached, and her hands were raw, but there was satisfaction in it. Something solid and real. Lydia appeared with a basket, skipping toward them. Papa, Miss Maggie, I picked wildflowers. She held up a bundle of scraggly yellow blooms. They were half wilted, but her smile was radiant. They're beautiful, Maggie said, taking them. Should we put them in water? Yes, Mama used to put them in the blue jar by the window. Silas's expression darkened. Lydia, I'll find the jar, Maggie said quickly. She took Lydia's hand and headed toward the house. Behind them Silas stood frozen, watching them go, his fists clenched at his sides. Inside, Maggie found the blue jar tucked on a high shelf. It was dusty, as if it hadn't been touched in years. She filled it with water and arranged the wildflowers carefully. Mama loved yellow flowers, Lydia said softly. What else did she love? Stories. And singing. And making biscuits. Lydia looked up at Maggie with those heartbreaking eyes. Do you know any stories? A few. Will you tell me one? Maggie glanced toward the window. Silas was still outside, working alone, his movements sharp and angry. How about we make those biscuits first? Maggie suggested. And I'll tell you a story while we work. Lydia's face brightened. Really? Really? They worked side by side, flour dusting their hands and aprons. Maggie told a story about a princess who wasn't waiting to be rescued, a princess who saved herself. Lydia listened, wide-eyed and laughing in all the right places. When the biscuits came out of the oven, golden and steaming, Lydia clapped her hands. They looked just like Mama's. The kitchen door opened. Silas stepped inside, his hat in his hands. He stopped when he saw them. The flour on Lydia's nose. The biscuits cooling on the counter. The blue jar with its wilted flowers on the windowsill. Something in his expression cracked. Papa, look! We made biscuits! Silas didn't speak. He just looked at Maggie. There was gratitude in his eyes, and fear, as if he was watching something precious that might shatter at any moment. They smell good, he said finally, his voice rough. Sit down, Maggie said gently. I'll pour coffee. They sat together at the table. Lydia chattered happily between bites. Silas ate slowly, his eyes flicking between his daughter and the woman who'd appeared less than a day ago. The stranger who somehow felt less strange with every passing hour. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Maggie sat on the porch steps. The stars were starting to appear, endless and bright. The door opened behind her. Silas stepped out. Can I ask you something? Maggie said. Reckon so. Earlier you said you knew of Mr. Palmer, the man I was supposed to marry. What did you mean? Silas's jaw tightened. Edward Palmer's got a reputation. Gambles heavy, drinks heavier. Had 3 mail-order brides in the last 4 years. Maggie's blood went cold. What happened to them? First one left after a month. Second one died in childbirth. Third one. He paused. Sheriff found her with a black eye and a broken wrist. Maggie's hands trembled. Why didn't anyone warn me? How would they? You were already on the train. She thought about the letters, the promises, the careful handwriting. I would have walked right into it, she whispered. Maybe. Or maybe you would have seen through him. Silas looked at her. You're here now. That's what matters. When the train comes, where will I go? That's up to you. I don't have anywhere else. Then don't go. The words hung between them. Simple. Impossible. Silas. I ain't asking you to stay forever, just longer than 3 days. Because my daughter smiles when you're around, because the house don't feel so empty. Tears stung Maggie's eyes. I don't know how to be what Lydia needs. Neither do I, but we're both trying. Maggie looked out at the darkness, at the vast future stretching before her. "All right," she said softly. "I'll stay a little longer." Silas exhaled, relief evident in his shoulders. But in the distance, barely visible in the moonlight, a rider approached. In his saddlebag was a letter addressed to Miss Maggie O'Connell, from Mr. Edward Palmer. The rider arrived at dawn. Maggie was in the kitchen, kneading dough for the morning bread when she heard hoofbeats. She wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window. A man dismounted near the barn, tall, well-dressed, with a silver-handled pistol at his hip. Even from a distance she could see the calculation in his eyes. Silas stepped out of the barn, his posture immediately defensive. "Can I help you?" His voice carried across the yard. "Looking for a Miss Maggie O'Connell. Heard she got off at the wrong station." Maggie's breath caught. She recognized that voice from somewhere deep in her memory. Smooth, too smooth. "Who's asking?" Silas said. "Edward Palmer, her intended husband." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Got her contract right here. Says she owes me a wife or the travel money back. $200. Maggie's knees went weak. $200? She didn't have $2. Silas's jaw tightened. "She ain't here." "That so?" "Because the station master said she left with you 3 days ago. She moved on." Palmer smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Then you won't mind if I search the property?" "I mind plenty. This is private land. And this is a legal contract." Palmer's hand drifted toward his pistol. "Now I can involve the sheriff. Or you can be reasonable." The kitchen door was behind Maggie. She could run, hide in the barn, take a horse and disappear into the hills. But Lydia was still asleep upstairs. Maggie took a breath and stepped onto the porch. "I'm here," she called out. Both men turned. Silas's expression darkened with something that looked like betrayal. Palmer's face lit up with triumph. "There she is." Palmer strode toward the house. "Miss O'Connell, you gave me quite the scare disappearing like that." Up close he was handsome in a cold way. Sharp features, calculating eyes. His smile was all teeth. "Mr. Palmer," Maggie said carefully, "I apologize for the confusion. The conductor told me the wrong station. These things happen." He reached for her hand. His grip was too tight. "The important thing is you're safe. We can be married by week's end." Maggie pulled her hand back. "I'm not sure that's—" "Not sure?" Palmer's smile thinned. "We have a contract, Miss O'Connell. You agreed to terms. I paid your travel expenses. In the eyes of the law, you owe me either a wife or reimbursement. I don't have $200. "Then it seems your choice is clear." Silas stepped between them. "She ain't going anywhere." Palmer's eyes narrowed. "And who exactly are you to her?" "Someone who knows your reputation." "Careful, Crow. Slander's a serious accusation." "Ain't slander if it's true. 3 brides in 4 years. 1 ran, 1 died. 1 ended up with broken bones." Palmer's expression went cold. "You're repeating gossip." "Sheriff's report ain't gossip. The sheriff cleared me of any wrongdoing." Palmer turned back to Maggie. "These are lies told by a woman scorned. I treated my wives with nothing but respect." "Then why'd the 3rd one run?" Silas pressed. "That's between me and her." Palmer's hand moved to his pistol. "Now Miss O'Connell is coming with me, peacefully or otherwise." "Papa?" Everyone turned. Lydia stood in the doorway, her nightgown wrinkled, clutching her rag doll. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Lydia, go inside," Silas said. "Who's that man? Why's he yelling?" Palmer's expression softened in a way that made Maggie's skin crawl. "Well, hello there, little miss. Ain't you a pretty thing?" Lydia shrank back. "Miss Maggie?" Maggie moved instinctively toward the child. "It's all right, sweetheart. Is he taking you away?" The question hung in the air. Maggie looked at Lydia's terrified face, at Silas's clenched fists, at Palmer's cold, expectant smile. "No," Maggie heard herself say. "He's not." Palmer's smile vanished. "Excuse me? I'm not going with you, Mr. Palmer. The contract is void." "That's not how contracts work. It is when they're signed under false pretenses." Maggie's voice steadied. "You told me you were a successful rancher, a widower looking for a partner. You didn't mention the gambling, the drinking, the violence." "Lies," Palmer hissed. "Are they? Then why don't we ride into town right now? Ask the sheriff to show us those reports?" Palmer's hand tightened on his pistol. You're making a mistake. The mistake was getting on that train. For a moment nobody moved. The morning air felt heavy, dangerous. Then Palmer laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. You think you're safe here? With him? He gestured at Silas. He's broke. This ranch is mortgaged to the hilt. Another bad season and he'll lose everything. That ain't your concern, Silas said quietly. And you, Palmer turned back to Maggie. You think he's your hero? He's just a desperate man who needs free labor. The moment you stop being useful, he'll toss you out. Get off my property, Silas said. His voice was low, deadly calm. Palmer held up his hands in mock surrender. Fine. I'll go. But this isn't over, Miss O'Connell. You signed a contract. I'll have the law on my side. He mounted his horse, looking down at them with cold contempt. Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts. Reality's coming for both of you. He spurred his horse and rode off, dust rising in his wake. Maggie's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the porch steps, her hands shaking. Silas crouched in front of her. You all right? I don't know. She looked up at him. Is what he said true? About the ranch? We're managing. That's not an answer. Silas sighed. We had a drought last year, lost half the herd. I had to take a loan. But we'll make it through. And if you don't, then we don't. He met her eyes. But that ain't your burden to carry. Miss Maggie? Lydia's small voice interrupted. The little girl climbed into Maggie's lap, trembling. Are you leaving? Maggie wrapped her arms around the child. No, sweetheart. I'm staying right here. Promise? Maggie looked at Silas. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hope, fear, something deeper. I promise, Maggie whispered. And for the first time since stepping off that train, she meant it. But as the sun climbed higher, none of them saw the figure watching from the ridge. Palmer hadn't left. He was planning his next move. 3 days passed like a held breath. Maggie threw herself into the work. Up before dawn, milking Bess, feeding chickens, scrubbing floors until her knuckles bled, as if exhaustion could chase away the feeling of being watched. Because she was being watched, she felt it in her bones. Silas felt it too. He carried his rifle now, even to the barn. His eyes constantly scanned the horizon. At night he sat on the porch long after Lydia was asleep, a shadow against the starlight. On the 4th day, the sheriff came. Maggie was hanging laundry when she saw the badge glinting in the afternoon sun. Her stomach dropped. Sheriff Dockery was older, gray-haired with eyes that had seen too much. He dismounted slowly, favoring his left leg. Afternoon, Silas, he called out. Silas emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. Sheriff. That necessary? These days? Yeah. Dockery's gaze shifted to Maggie. You must be Miss O'Connell. I am. Got a complaint filed against you. Edward Palmer says you're in breach of contract. Maggie's hands clenched in the wet fabric. I know. He's asking for reimbursement. $200. Or he wants you to honor the marriage agreement. I can't do either of those things. Then we got a problem. Dockery pulled out a folded document. This here's a legal contract, miss. Your signature's on it. I signed it under false pretenses. He lied about who he was. That's your word against his. What about the other brides? Silas interjected. Dockery's expression darkened. That case was closed, no charges filed, because she was too scared to testify. Without her statement, I got nothing. Dockery sighed. I'm sorry, Miss O'Connell, but Palmer's within his rights. You either pay him back or marry him. Those are your choices. Or, Silas said quietly, she could marry someone else. If she's legally married, Palmer's contract becomes void. The words hung in the air like smoke. Maggie's heart hammered. Marry someone else. Before Palmer gets a court order, which will be soon. Dockery looked between them. I'm not telling you what to do, just explaining the law. How long do we have? Silas asked. Palmer's filing paperwork tomorrow. Judge might rule by week's end. Dockery mounted his horse. Think carefully, both of you. Palmer ain't the forgiving type. He rode away, leaving them standing in the yard. The laundry forgotten. Miss Maggie? Lydia stood in the doorway holding her doll. Why was the sheriff here? Just checking on us, sweetheart. Maggie said, forcing a smile. Is it because of the mean man? Silas and Maggie exchanged glances. Go inside, Lydia, Silas said gently. Miss Maggie will be there in a minute. Lydia hesitated, then disappeared into the house. Silas turned to Maggie. We need to talk. They walked to the corral, away from the house. The horses grazed peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing. You heard what the sheriff said, Silas began. I did. There's one way out of this. Maggie's hands shook. She gripped the fence rail to steady them. You can't be suggesting a marriage of convenience. On paper only. Silas's voice was carefully neutral. You'd be protected. Palmer couldn't touch you. And what would you get out of it? Help around the ranch. Someone for Lydia. He paused. A chance to keep my word. What word? I told you that you were safe here. I meant it. Maggie looked at him. The lines around his eyes. The set of his jaw. The way his hands gripped the fence like it was the only thing keeping him upright. This isn't your fight, Silas. Maybe not, but it's my choice. He met her eyes. I ain't asking you to love me. I ain't even asking you to stay forever. Just let me help you now. And if Palmer comes back, then we deal with it. Together. The words settled between them. Together. Lydia would think it's real, Maggie said quietly. I know. She'd get attached. More than she already is. I know that too. Maggie closed her eyes. Thought about Palmer's cold smile. The broken wrist. Thought about Lydia's laugh. The weight of her small hand. The way the house felt less empty. Thought about Silas. The careful distance he kept. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. All right, she whispered. I'll do it. Silas exhaled slowly. We'll go to town tomorrow. Talk to Reverend Matthews. That evening they told Lydia together. We have something to tell you, sweetheart, Silas began, kneeling in front of his daughter. Lydia looked between them, curious. What is it? Miss Maggie and I are going to get married. For a moment Lydia just stared. Then her face split into the widest smile Maggie had ever seen. Really? Really truly? Really truly, Maggie said, her voice catching. Lydia launched herself at Maggie, wrapping her arms around her neck. You're going to be my mama. Maggie held the child close, tears streaming down her face. Over Lydia's shoulder she met Silas's eyes. He looked relieved, terrified, and something else that made her heart skip. Hopeful. That night Maggie lay awake in the spare room. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Silas Crowe, a wife in name only, a temporary solution to an impossible problem. But as she listened to the sound of Lydia's soft breathing from the next room and Silas's steady footsteps on the porch below, she wondered. What if temporary became permanent? What if convenience became something more? What if the wrong station had been the right one all along? She was still awake when she heard it. The crack of breaking glass, a shout from outside. Fire! Maggie bolted from bed and ran to the window. Orange flames licked up the side of the barn, hungry and spreading fast. And standing in the yard lit by the growing inferno was Edward Palmer. He was holding a torch and smiling. Come on out, Miss O'Connell, he called. Let's settle this like civilized folk. The door to Silas's room crashed open. He appeared with his rifle, his face grim. Get Lydia, he said. Now. Maggie ran, scooped the confused, crying child from her bed, held her tight. Below, Silas stepped onto the porch. You're making a mistake, Palmer. The only mistake was letting her think she had a choice. Palmer threw the torch at the porch. It landed with a spray of sparks. She's mine by law, and I always collect what's owed. The fire spread, faster than seemed possible. The dry wood caught like kindling. Silas raised his rifle. Last warning, leave now or face the consequences. Palmer laughed. You gonna shoot me, Crow? In front of witnesses? In front of your daughter? He gestured to the darkness behind him. 3 men stepped into the firelight, all armed. Now then, Palmer said, his smile widening. Let's talk about that contract. Maggie held Lydia tight, the child's sobs muffled against her shoulder. Through the window, flames consumed the barn. Palmer's men surrounded the house. They were trapped. Stay here, Silas said from the doorway. His voice was steel. No matter what happens, you stay with Lydia. Silas, there are 4 of them. I know. He met her eyes. Something passed between them. But I ain't letting him take you. He disappeared down the stairs. Maggie set Lydia down, hands shaking. Sweetheart, I need you to be very brave. Lydia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Stay right here. Don't come out until I say. Maggie grabbed the pistol from the drawer. Her father had taught her to shoot. She crept downstairs. Through the window she saw Silas on the porch. Palmer stood in the firelight. Send out the girl, Palmer called. No one else needs to get hurt. Over my dead body. Palmer smiled. That can be arranged. One of his men raised a rifle. Maggie kicked open the door, pistol aimed. Don't. All eyes turned to her. There she is, Palmer said. Come on down, darling. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. Actually, a voice called from darkness. She does. Sheriff Dockery rode into the firelight, 3 deputies behind him, rifles ready. Palmer's confidence flickered. This is a legal matter, Sheriff. Can't do that. You just committed arson and assault. Dockery's voice was hard. Drop your weapons now. Palmer's men hesitated. The odds had shifted. You're making a mistake, Palmer hissed. No. You did. The moment you thought you could terrorize decent folks. Dockery gestured. Take them. Palmer reached for his pistol. Don't! Silas shouted. A shot rang out. Palmer stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. Dockery's gun stayed level. Next one goes through your heart. Palmer sank to his knees, defeated. The deputies hauled him away, his curses fading. Dockery looked at the burning barn. We saw the smoke from town, figured Palmer might try something. Thank you, Silas said quietly. That barn's a loss, but the contract is void. Dockery looked at Maggie. You're free, miss. Maggie's knees buckled. Silas caught her. Mama! Lydia burst from the house. You're okay. Maggie sank down, holding the child close. We're all okay. Is the bad man gone? Lydia asked. He's gone, Silas said, crouching beside them. He ain't coming back. Lydia wrapped her arms around both of them, creating a circle of 3. The next hours passed in a blur. Neighbors arrived with buckets. The barn was lost, but the house stood. As dawn broke, Maggie stood in the yard, soot-stained, exhausted, alive. Silas approached with coffee. Thought you could use this. They watched the sunrise in silence. The sky painted gold and rose. I meant what I said, Silas said finally. The offer still stands. The marriage? Yeah. You don't have to anymore. I'm free. I know, he faced her. But maybe I ain't asking out of obligation. Her breath caught. Silas. These last few days, seeing you with Lydia, watching you make this place feel like home. He paused. I don't want you to leave. I don't have anywhere to go. That ain't why I'm asking. I want you here, as my wife. If you'll have me. Tears blurred her vision. We barely know each other. Then we'll learn. We got time. Lydia loves me already. She does. And you? Silas was quiet for a long moment. I'm getting there. Honest. Real. More than empty promises. Maggie thought about the wrong station. The stranger who'd offered shelter. Lydia's laughter. Silas's quiet strength. All right, she said softly. Let's do this right. Not out of fear, because we're choosing it. Silas pulled her close. She fit there, like she'd always belonged. Miss Maggie? Papa. Lydia ran toward them. Are we a real family now? Maggie looked at Silas. He smiled. Yeah, sweetheart, he said. We're a real family. 3 weeks later they stood in the small church in Ridgeway. Reverend Matthews smiled as he spoke the words. Lydia held both their hands. When Silas kissed his bride, it was gentle, full of promise. The congregation applauded. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly. The sky clear and blue, a fresh start. Maggie climbed into the wagon beside her husband. Lydia sat between them, chattering about the cake and flowers and how pretty the dress was. As they rode back, Maggie saw the sign for Ridgemont, the life she'd planned. She smiled. Because sometimes the wrong station leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Sometimes the detour is the destination. You okay? Silas asked quietly. Maggie squeezed his hand, felt Lydia's weight against her side, saw the ranch appear on the horizon. I'm home, she said. And she meant it. And the end, If this story of survival, courage, and unexpected love touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Wild West Untold Love for more tales of redemption on the frontier. And if a moment or a feeling in this story stayed with you, we'd love to hear it in the comments below. Because sometimes the strongest souls are forged in the darkest places, and the greatest love stories begin with the simplest act of kindness.